She missed the job interview of her life because she stopped to help a lost little girl. What she didn't know: that child belonged to the billionaire CEO who was about to change her fate forever. Smash like, subscribe, share, and tell me in the comments which city you're watching from right now. Don't skip what's about to come next. Will break your heart and rebuild it. Valerie Hamilton learned early that hope needed to be folded small, the kind of hope that fits inside a lunchbox, a bus pass, and a threadbare cuff. She had the kind of life where two jobs slid together like imperfect gears, where the hot water sometimes went on strike, and where a stuffed dinosaur under Mateo's pillow counted as both toy and moral support. The resume in her bag had been printed on the last page of an almost empty ink cartridge. The edges were fuzzed from being refolded and smoothed more times than she could count. Today, of all days, that crumpled document had to be perfect. Street Augustine Hotel was the kind of place Valerie had only ever admired through window glare and job boards. Corporate events manager meant steady hours, a decent salary, and maybe, just maybe, a fridge with more than condiments. She walked for 45 minutes to save bus fare, had rehearsed answers in the apartment mirror, and told herself a dozen little pep talks until they sounded like lies she wanted to believe. At exactly 8:47, the bus did what buses do. It left. The driver glanced in the rear view like a man observing a small, inconvenient fact and closed the door. Valerie watched the taillights disappear down the avenue with the kind of slow-motion grief that only shows up when everything important is slipping through your fingers. She sprinted by sprint, I mean the half-trot, half-panicked shuffle that looks athletic from a distance and ridiculous up close, only to see the bus round the corner, Diesel sighing behind it like a defiant excuse. You can imagine the scene. Resumes flying out of her bag like white pigeons at a wedding. 15 copies she'd stayed up printing the night before surrendered to wind and careless shoes. One landed under a taxi tire and rode away into the city as if destiny had a better sense of humor than she did. Valerie threw herself on the sidewalk to collect them, palms scraping, heart thumping, while commuters stepped over her like she was a misplaced suitcase. A man in a suit asked if she was okay. She gave him her best professional smile and a lie that sounded half asleep. "I'm great." He moved on. Of course he did. Her phone flashed 8:53. 7 minutes. 12 blocks. The world reduced to a simple math problem she was suddenly failing. If she ran like a person with a deadline and a child depending on the answer, could she make it? The optimistic part of her brain said yes. The practical part said her lungs remembered staircases differently now that she carried responsibility. She shoved the ruined resumes back in her bag and started again, faster this time. Like a woman with no option but forward. 2 blocks later, she saw the girl. Kids disappear in crowds with the efficiency of magic. 1 second, the city is a sea of umbrellas and office bags. The next, a small person stands in the middle of it all, tears carving tracks down cheeks that were too small for such worry. Skylar stood by a newspaper kiosk, shoulders trembling, coat zipped up, hair falling in a way that made the sun seem too polite for the scene. People flowed around her, eyes purposeful, as though nothing in the world could be interrupted by a small human catastrophe. Most people gave 2 seconds of sorrow and kept walking. Not Valerie. Her breath hitched in a way that felt like a memory. Mateo at 2 a.m., with a fever, the neighbor's number disconnected, the helplessness she'd promised never to repeat. The interview could wait. She thought if she had to choose between paperwork and a child, she'd choose the child, even if that choice sounded spectacularly dangerous. She crouched down and said the only thing that mattered. "Hey, it's okay. What happened?" Skylar's voice was a tiny broken thing. "I lost my dad." She sniffled. He answered his phone and then I looked away and he was gone. Valerie's chest squeezed. "What's your name?" "Skylar." "Skylar," Valerie said, tasting the name. It fit like a small treasure in her mouth. "Do you know your dad's name?" "Max Maximus," the girl managed. "Daddy Max." Valerie's internal alarm did a lazy little hop and dismissed the name as coincidence. Maximus what? City streets have a million names. Not all of them belong to fortunes, but the coat Skylar wore smelled faintly of cocoa and something cushioned with wealth, not that that mattered. The little hand she slipped into Valerie's palm was tiny and cold and trusting. They started looking. Valerie asked a security guard, a hot dog vendor, A woman juggling 3 shopping bags who didn't have a spare second for compassion. Responses were helpful in the most unhelpful way. A blank stare, a no, sorry, a distracted shrug. Skylar's lip trembled. Valerie promised, maybe foolishly, that she would find Daddy Max, and then he appeared. Tall, suit honed, phone glued to his ear, moving like someone who built towers for a living. The world narrowed to the way he walked and the way he saw his child, and then almost fell apart with relief. He scooped Skylar up with the kind of hug that refolded both of them into something whole. For a second, Valerie felt like she was watching a private movie in public, the kind that insists on occupying your bones with a sudden ache. He looked up, blue eyes that could have been carved for introspection. That face, in a flash, set part of the city on a different pivot. "You found her?" he asked, voice rough, too old for someone who had everything on paper and too honest for someone who had everything on screens. Valerie said, "I just helped." It sounded small because it was. The man thanked her, quickly, important people, gratefulness, brief, precise, and already back to business. He pressed Skylar's cheek, said something about never again, and the two of them slipped back into the stream of people, leaving Valerie with wind in her face and a ridiculous number blinking on her phone. 9:12. The interview had been at 9. 12 minutes. In the world she'd practiced entering professionally, 12 minutes looked like an invitation to, "We'll be in touch," and never call. Her chest dropped like an elevator with bad news. She leaned on the magazine stand, trying to collect breath and dignity at once. The city kept going. Taxis, a man arguing into a headset, a dog impatient for a walk. She blinked hard and wiped a single tear with the back of her hand, practical, unnoticed. A small water that meant more than anyone crossing the street could know. And then, for reasons that had nothing to do with fairness and everything to do with the universe's weird sense of irony, Layla from the Street Augustine front desk called her name. "Miss Hamilton?" "Mr. Klein's assistant says he had an emergency, but he's running late. You can wait on the 2nd floor. Valerie staggered into a laugh that could have been hysteria. The interviewer was late. She had a chance. She smoothed the crease in her blazer with a hand that trembled more than she wanted to admit, switched to the elevator, and practiced not looking like she'd been on the pavement 20 minutes earlier. The marble lobby swallowed her up in polished glass and chandeliers and a scent of lemon cleaner that made her feel like a secret intruder at a banquet. She sat in the waiting room with 3 other candidates who looked as if their lives had been ironed. Madison clicked through her phone with the intensity of someone solving global warming. Patricia kept sipping coffee like it was a nervous ritual. They watched Valerie like she was a weather event. Curious, slightly dismissive, not quite compassionate. Valerie hugged Mateo's photo out of habit in her mind and rehearsed a single line she'd printed and reprinted in her head. "I'm ready." Her name was called. The assistant smiled genuinely this time. "Mr. Klein's meeting was delayed, but he'll see you now." The mahogany door stood between her and the rest of her life. She stepped forward, felt the handle cool under her palm, and for one ridiculous second thought about the mints in her purse, the pen without a cap, the used napkin she'd used to blot her cheek. Then she pushed the door and the office took her breath away. Glass, city view, a man with a back to the skyline who turned and made the world stop. Valerie froze in the doorway. The CEO who had been a stranger in the street just an hour earlier, the father who had clutched his daughter as if the world had nearly taken her, was now standing at the far end of the glass-walled office with his back to her, hands resting lightly on the edges of the panoramic window as though steadying the entire skyline beneath his palms. Maximus Klein, Skylar's father. The billionaire CEO she absolutely did not expect to see today, and certainly not as her interviewer. Her breath caught. Not in a romantic way. More like, "Oh no, oh no, oh no." The assistant closed the door gently behind her, sealing Valerie inside with her nerves and Maximus's very expensive silhouette. For a moment, Valerie thought about running. Just turning around, grabbing the handle, sprinting down the hallway and pretending none of this had ever happened. But then Maximus turned, and the world, again, seemed to stop. Those same ice-blue eyes, sharp, commanding, startling, widened just slightly when he recognized her. She felt the reaction ripple across his face. Confusion, surprise, something else she couldn't place. His suit was charcoal black, tailored within an inch of perfection. The thumbnail image didn't do him justice. He looked like success had been poured into a person. Valerie forced a smile. A small one. A nervous one. The kind of smile that says, "Hi. Yes, I'm the disaster you saw an hour ago, helping your crying child while my life burned down around me. Miss Hamilton?" he said, voice lower than she expected. "Present," she answered, immediately regretting the choice of word. "I mean, yes, that's me, Valerie. Hamilton. Hi. A tiny silence followed. Maximus blinked once, slowly, then straightened. "Please, have a seat." She sat before her knees gave out. He moved with the quiet precision of someone used to being obeyed. Someone used to running empires. Not interviews with women who stumbled into buildings like wind-up toys losing battery. He sat across from her. The table between them gleamed so cleanly, Valerie was afraid her reflection looked as panicked as she felt. Even now, her mind darted back to the waiting room where Madison had looked her up and down with that elegant lipsticked smile of "bless your unfortunate soul." Madison, the candidate who seemed to have been born in a blazer, and Patricia, sweet Patricia, who had trembled from caffeine and nerves, whispering, "You look like you've been through a journey," as though Valerie hadn't literally been chasing paper doves down a street an hour ago. Valerie had told them the truth. "I have $43 to my name and a son who wants pizza if I get this job." Madison had looked horrified. Patricia had looked sympathetic. Valerie had tried not to look like someone who had run out of mints and hope simultaneously, and now she was here, facing the man whose daughter she'd helped, whose company she desperately needed to work for, whose eyes were way more intimidating up close. Wonderful. Perfect timing. Maximus leaned forward slightly, studying her with that same analytical gaze she'd seen on TV interviews, the look of a man known for reading balance sheets, stock markets, and lies. "You're," he began. "The messy woman from the street?" Valerie blurted. His expression twitched. "I was going to say, the woman who helped my daughter when she was terrified." "Oh," Valerie swallowed. "That's much nicer." A breath of air, maybe a laugh, escaped him before he regained full CEO composure. He interlaced his fingers on the desk. "Miss Hamilton, I won't pretend this isn't unexpected." "Same," she whispered. "You still want to proceed with the interview?" She hesitated, then nodded. "I need the job, Mr. Klein." And that was the truth. The whole thing. Unpolished, unpretendable. He regarded her for a long beat, then nodded. "Very well," he said. "Let's begin." Maximus eased into formal interview mode, except the tension in the air was nothing like any interview Valerie had experienced. Maybe because his eyes kept flicking to her hair, her rumpled blazer, the faint smudge on her cheek. Maybe because he had seen her in a moment of pure chaos, paper flying, desperation showing. Maybe because they both knew kindness had cost her something. "Your resume," he said, lifting a copy with a shoe print still visible on the corner, "has had a morning." Valerie's soul nearly disintegrated. She covered her face with both hands. "Oh my God, I tried to fix them, I really did. But people kept stepping on everything I love today." A sound like an amused exhale slipped from him, dangerously close to a laugh, and that tiny crack in his armor made her shoulders loosen. He studied her again and asked, "Why do you want this position?" She could have lied. She could have scripted something. Instead, "Because I have a son named Matteo who looks at me like I can do anything. And I don't want to disappoint him." Maximus's expression softened. "And professionally?" he prompted gently. "The truth?" she asked. "I prefer it. I'm good," she said firmly. "Really good. At events, logistics, crisis management. My last boss once said if an asteroid hit Earth during a corporate gala, I'd negotiate with the asteroid to wait until dessert." He actually laughed. She flushed. "I'm sorry. I joke when I'm nervous." "I've noticed." Her mouth dropped open. Sorry, you noticed." "You came into the building like a tornado, apologizing for being a tornado," he said. "And yet, somehow, you still carried yourself with dignity." Valerie blinked. "That's the nicest way anyone has ever described my disasters." Maximus cleared his throat back to business. though his gaze lingered differently now. Tell me about your experience leading large teams. She described 200-person conferences, tight schedules, vendor crises, how she once had to replace an entire shipment of wine in 45 minutes using nothing but 3 favors and someone's cousin with a truck. Maximus listened with full focus, quiet, impressed. And what would you say is your greatest weakness? He asked. Real chocolate, she said instantly. He almost choked. She scrambled. Perfectionism, or impatience, or something professional sounding. But he was still smiling, shaking his head. You're very honest, Miss Hamilton. Is that bad? No, he said softly. It's refreshing. They held each other's gaze a moment longer than appropriate. Something shifted. Something neither of them knew how to name. What you did today, Maximus said after a pause. Most people wouldn't have stopped. I know, Valerie whispered. I watched them walk past her. He nodded slowly. And yet you didn't. Because she was scared, Valerie said. Because she's a little girl. Because she reminded me of Matteo when he's overwhelmed. His expression flickered empathy, recognition, a shared parenthood, unspoken but understood. Skylar doesn't open up to many people, Maximus admitted. But she wouldn't stop talking about the nice lady who held my hand. The words hit Valerie like warmth in cold weather. She's a wonderful kid, Valerie said. Maximus swallowed. She is. And she's been through a lot. Another shared silence, gentle, weighty. Then he straightened again, clearing the emotional air. Miss Hamilton, I believe your qualifications speak for themselves. And I believe character matters just as much. Her heart thumped hard. Was this? But before her hopes could sprint somewhere dangerous, he placed a folder on the table. A schedule. A budget. 3 pages of event disaster waiting to happen. This evening, Maximus said. We're hosting a private corporate dinner for 180 guests. Our coordinator had an emergency. We need someone to take charge. Valerie blinked once, twice. Then, in a very small voice, right, tonight. As in, tonight? Yes, he said. Tonight. This isn't a prank, right? You're not testing if I'll faint? I'm not in the habit of pranking candidates. Okay, she whispered, steadying herself. Okay. Yes. I can do it. I want to do it. He studied her again. You're not scared? He asked. Oh, I'm terrified, she admitted. But being terrified never stopped me before. Maximus's lips curved, slow, subtle, admiring. He stood, offering his hand. She stood too, her hand slipping into his. Warm, firm, and much more lingering than any professional handshake had the right to be. Do this well, Maximus said quietly, and the position is yours. And tomorrow morning, come see me again. Her breath caught. Yes, Mr. Klein. As she turned to leave, the door creaked open, and there, leaning casually against the hallway wall, stood Leo Baker, senior manager. Sharp jaw, slick smile, eyes narrowed with curiosity or something colder. His gaze flicked from Valerie to Maximus to their still-touched fingertips, and something ugly flashed behind his eyes. She dropped Maximus's hand fast. Leo smirked. Maximus's expression hardened. Valerie stepped out of the office and exhaled like she'd been underwater. What was about to come next? Only everything. If this made your heart race, share this story, and don't forget to subscribe. What's coming next is the trial by fire that will push Valerie past her limits. Valerie stepped out of the CEO's office and inhaled as if the hallway air might steady her. It didn't. It crackled instead, alive with the small mechanical hums of a building preparing for an evening it expected to execute without drama. Tonight, it would not be executed without drama for reasons that, for the moment, felt dangerously close to her full name. Rebecca met her by the service elevator with a tablet and a face that said, "You have 5 minutes to change the world." "Chef Monroe is angry," she said. "Sound has a static issue, and the linen delivery is late. The client called to confirm extra glasses. Here's the folder. You have access to the staff list. Use it. I'll get you a radio." She thrust the coordination folder into Valerie's arms. The weight of it was oddly consoling. Paper was something she knew how to read. Chaos could be organized into lists, and lists could be checked off. The chairlift clanged, the service elevator sighed, and the backstage of the Street Augustine unfurled like a city behind the glitter. Valerie's first stop was the kitchen where Chef Monroe stood, like a general at the head of his battalion, white jacket, hair slicked, mustache doing all the work of expression for a face that didn't trust emotion. Pans sang. Steam made the air sweet and sharp. "You're the one?" he barked without turning. "That would be me," Valerie said. "I'll need the main course timings, plating sequence, and any constraints on hot holding." He spat a laugh that barely pretended to be humor. "You expect miracles or a menu?" he asked. "Both," she said. He threw a knife at a piece of wood figuratively and then handed over a printout. "You'd better know what you're doing," he muttered. "We don't have time for guesswork." She scribbled notes on the margins of the folder and moved on. Flowers were next. A swarm of florists circling a table of centerpieces, petals strewn like confetti remnants of panic. "2 of these should be left-centered," the lead decorator insisted. "Not symmetrical." Valerie adjusted their plan, translated aesthetic language into precise inches, and watched the frustrating artistry get practical. AV trouble hummed down the corridor. The sound tech cursed a phantom static that made the main microphone buzz as though 1,000 angry bees camped inside it. Valerie dialed the supplier, bargained for a replacement mic on the truck that was, by some miracle, still in the city, and promised a dinner voucher in exchange for the driver's patience. She negotiated with a calmness that tasted like desperation made precise. Then she flagged down a young sound tech and handed him a checklist with the authority of someone who'd slept in chairs and still met deadlines. The hotel's vanes, kitchen, prep rooms, folding stations were now under her hands. She moved like someone translating a storm into a manageable rain. Problems came in waves, the way tide drags different flotsam onto shore. The ice arrived softer than expected. Someone had miscalculated ambient temperature, and by the time the bar was set, puddles were forming like small, cold moons. Valerie barked commands, redirected reserves, and called for backup bins while instructing the bar manager to pre-chill glasses and rotate ice buckets every 7 minutes. Each small order created a new ripple that she had to catch. A tray of champagne flutes toppled when a waiter tripped on a rug that shouldn't have been in the walkway. Glass shattered in a sound like betrayal. Valerie counted staff, reorganized service patterns, and sent a junior waiter to the storeroom for backups. "If someone asks, it was a gust of wind," she told a young man who was shaking. He laughed hysterical, then stilled enough to breathe. Centerpieces looked wrong when light hit them. A florist had misread the brief and created symmetric montages when the client expressly wanted a flowing asymmetry. Valerie suggested a subtle skew and got 3 extra hands to pin greenery into place until the arrangement looked deliberate rather than mistaken. The microphone buzz wouldn't die. It warmed as soon as someone walked near it. A minor electrical fault turned into a major test. The band rehearsed one bar and stopped. The singer tutted and then smiled, but the client's representative was watching like a hawk. Valerie sent an assistant to swap cables, had a tech run a cable around a different conduit, and rerouted power so the mic's phantom load dissipated. The tech came back sweaty and triumphant. The static fell silent like a storm giving up. An invoice discrepancy surfaced. A vendor claimed they'd been paid for an expensive upgrade that hadn't been approved. Rebecca's HR inbox pinged with a message that could tilt the night. A missing confirmation, a traceable line in the coordination sheet. Valerie opened the folder and felt a hot, familiar panic. She called the vendor, apologized, found the missing signature on a PDF buried in a Friday email, and secured written confirmation. Tiny administrative miracles, each one a quiet rescue. Every time the night tried to splinter into chaos, Valerie answered with pragmatic gestures. She delegated, prioritized, and for the few times when no procedure applied, made decisions that would have been criticized in calmer contexts, but saved the moment. Her tongue cracked jokes when people needed them. Her voice sharpened commands when speed was required. People followed. That is leadership, the ability to make others want to be competent. From the mezzanine, Maximus watched. He didn't descend like a man checking boxes. He observed like someone cataloging how another mind solved variable problems. He watched how Valerie's voice moved through the kitchen, not too loud to command, not too soft to be lost. He watched the way she asked the florist the question that unlocked the asymmetry. How she handed the tech a screwdriver with a command in gratitude. He watched how staff moved when she moved, the gentle acceleration of a team responding to a steady center. He didn't interfere. He stood with his hands in his pockets and let the room reveal her. When a waiter presented a sudden issue with seating, Valerie didn't hesitate. She reallocated a table, rewrote a seating cue, and whispered a correction to the maitre d' in a tone that made the man nod and smile. Maximus's face softened into an expression that could have been pride, if CEOs smiled at such things. At one point, he called Rebecca aside and said something low that made her look at the coordination folder and then at him, eyes wide. Whatever he said, it had to do with trust. He had seen her in the morning with Skylar, and he had seen her now, under pressure. Each view fit together like two halves. Amid the clatter, a small sound slipped into Valerie's ear. A voice message from Mateo. She'd told him she might be late. She thumbed her phone with a hand still sticky from ribbon glue and heard his little voice, muffled with a cartoon on in the background. "Mommy? Did you get the job? I ate a dinosaur cookie, but I saved some for you. Do you want it?" Her heart melted like the ice she'd just ordered replaced. "Tell him yes," she murmured to herself. "Tell him I'm doing my best." Skylar's laugh played in her mind, an 8-year-old giggle that liked the word penguin more than it should. It had been a sound that morning that stopped her from moving through the world in a single-minded, weary way. It had been a sound that reminded her why she chose to kneel and hold a small hand when the rush was all-consuming. She set the phone down and breathed. This wasn't about badges or titles. It was about a boy who wanted his mom home, and a little girl who needed someone to stop for her. Those are the stakes that move people faster and steadier than any paycheck. Guests arrived like a patient tide. By the time the main course hit the table, the room glowed. The asymmetrical centerpieces sympathetic to candlelight, waiters who moved like choreography, and sound that held every toast steady. The clients lead an executive with a tux and a watch that could probably be sold to fund a small country, stood and praised the arrangement. "Flawless," he said. "I don't think we could have asked for better." Valerie sat at a corner table, exhausted and hardly believing the silverware wasn't a trap. She watched a server hand a guest a glass and not spill, and a florist adjust one last petal and tilt their face into satisfaction. Chef Monroe, the culinary general, had been discreet all night. Now, as the plates went back to the kitchen with satisfied clinks, he passed Valerie near the pass and stopped. "You kept your head," he said in a voice that sounded like earned praise. "Most people panic." "You worked." "Good." The words were brief, but in that curt compliment she heard a recognition that mattered. The man who had doubted her had watched her make a chaotic orchestra into music. Maximus descended from the mezzanine during the final course, his coat thrown back like an afterthought. He found her in the back corridor, where the staff took a breath. "You did that," he said simply. Valerie felt a blush creep up like heat. "We did it," she corrected. He smiled in a way that reached his eyes. "We'll continue the conversations tomorrow," he said. "Come by at 8, and Rebecca will have paperwork ready. You've earned a provisional role." Her knees nearly betrayed her. Before she could say more, before gratitude could flatten into something simple, she saw Leo Baker at the edge of a service door, leaning with a smirk that sat wrong on his face. Maximus squeezed her shoulder once, a small, private gesture, and slipped away into the crowd. Valerie breathed. The applause for the event lingered like good music in her ears. Chef Monroe slapped her on the back in a manner that felt like a benediction. "Good work, Miss Hamilton. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." She laughed then, a ragged, astonished sound, and for the first time since the bus left her by the curb, she felt something resembling steadiness. But Leo's smile lingered in the back of her mind. He'd watched. He knew names and system clocks. He had a face that cataloged edges and was practiced at pushing people toward them. Valerie closed the coordination folder, smoothed the edges, and tucked it under her arm like a small, fragile future. She walked toward the staff exit, toward Rebecca, and into the night with a head that buzzed like a far-off power line. She thought she was safe. She was not. What's coming next will try to twist tonight's triumph into something that could unravel everything. If you're cheering Valerie on, smash that like. The next part will change the stakes and test whether kindness and competence can survive sabotage. The morning after the triumphant event should have felt like a victory lap. Valerie deserved that. She'd earned it with sweat, quick thinking, 3 improvised solutions involving flower wire and a borrowed screwdriver. But when she stepped into the staff corridor the next day, the atmosphere shifted the moment the elevator doors slid open. It wasn't applause she walked into. It was whispers. Low, soft, sticky whispers that wrapped themselves around passing glances. That's her. Trial hire already. Procedures weren't followed. Leo's not happy. Valerie kept her chin up. She'd learned long ago that already successful people whispered worst when they sensed someone climbing out of the trenches. She passed a pair of administrative assistants who immediately straightened their backs and pretended to study the coffee machine's digital menu. A junior manager stepped aside for her, but not in the polite way, in the avoiding contamination way. That one stung more than she wanted to admit. At the far end of the hallway, Rebecca waved her over. "You did incredible last night," Rebecca said, giving her a quick hug. "Chef Monroe told the kitchen you were a miracle with elbows. That's the closest he'll get to affection." Valerie smiled briefly. "Feels like the air changed overnight." Rebecca hesitated. "People talk when something shakes the hierarchy. And you shook it. Competence terrifies the insecure." "Which one is Leo?" Valerie asked. Rebecca didn't answer. She didn't need to. The tension worsened by the hour. In the break room, 2 coordinators murmured about a new procedure review coming from HR. Another mentioned documentation audits, with an eyebrow that rose pointedly in Valerie's direction. Someone else whispered about system logs being checked a red flag if there ever was one. It was weird. Not aggressive, not obvious, but unmistakably off. Even Preston, the HR lead known for greeting people with a smile 2 beats too long, paused when he passed her. "Morning, Miss Hamilton," he said, voice wrapped in awkward politeness. "Let's keep things transparent this week, yes?" Transparent? Transparent about what? She opened her mouth to ask, but he was already walking away, typing something too quickly into his tablet. A cold ripple passed through her. Something was wrong. Leo Baker didn't hate Valerie. Not at first. Hate required energy, passion, purpose. Leo was far too tired for those luxuries. But resentment? That was a steady, reliable friend. He'd spent 12 years in this hotel, 12 years building procedures, relationships, and the delicate internal politics that gave him silent power even when his title didn't. He understood the building better than anyone except Maximus himself, and Maximus had never noticed him. Not really. Not like this new woman, a woman who walked in and somehow shifted the CEO's attention in a single day. He had stood in the hallway outside the interview room, watching Maximus's expression soften as he spoke to Valerie. Leo had felt something inside him quietly rupture. He'd been passed over for 3 promotions. Overlooked during the staff overhaul 2 years ago. Blamed for a financial miscommunication he hadn't caused. He deserved better. He deserved recognition. He deserved control. So when Valerie's trial folder came through the internal system, Leo didn't hesitate. He slipped into the administrative back end like a pianist revisiting a favorite tune. He knew every login schedule, every vulnerable timestamp, every department that failed to rotate passwords. He duplicated Valerie's coordination file. He modified a few entries just enough to raise concern but not enough to be obvious. Changed a vendor login time here. Altered an invoice edit there. Then he used Valerie's digital ID, which he obtained during onboarding, like he did with all new staff, to timestamp the logs during hours she wasn't even working. He scheduled emails from her address to a restricted vendor. He planted a missing receipt warning with Preston via the automated workflow system. He built a narrative. Not a dagger, he wasn't a monster. More like a slope. A gentle incline that, with the right pressure, would send someone tumbling. Leo leaned back in his chair, exhaling. It wasn't personal. It was survival. It was fairness. She would be fine. People like her always got back on their feet, but if she stayed, he wouldn't. And Leo Baker refused to be erased again. Valerie was reviewing menu options for an upcoming wedding when her inbox pinged. From Preston. Subject: missing receipts urgent. Her stomach tightened. She opened the message. Valerie, please submit the receipts related to the invoice modification from last night's event. Our system shows an unauthorized change made using your ID. Please clarify by noon. Unauthorized? She hadn't touched any invoices after finalizing the budget with Rebecca. Then, as if summoned by dread, another email arrived. From Bella Floral. Subject. Modified order confirmation. Hi, Valerie. We received your second revision requesting a downgrade on centerpieces. Is everything correct? The request came through at 1:04 a.m. Quote, Valerie froze. She hadn't sent anything at 1:04 a.m. She'd been asleep, dead asleep, the kind of sleep that packs a week into one night. Her chest tightened. One anomaly could be a glitch. Two, a pattern. Her radio crackled. Valerie? It's Tom from AV. Did you approve the vendor rate changes for the mic replacements? We need your sign-off. What vendor rate changes? She asked. Came through the system with your digital signature. She nearly dropped the radio. This wasn't random. Someone was altering her work. Someone with access. She hunted through her files, flipping through the coordination folder as if the answers might be hiding between paper fibers. She retraced every decision from last night. When had she touched invoices? When had she sent emails? Who had access to her login? Why would someone target her? The more she thought, the more her temples pulsed. She went to Preston. He gave her a tight smile, the kind people use when they're already forming conclusions. I'm sure it's a misunderstanding, she said. That's what the memo will determine, he replied, folding his hands. Please send any documentation you have by end of day. Memo? He blinked at her. The formal review process. Formal? Her voice cracked. Preston, this is a mistake. I didn't do any of those changes. A shadow crossed his face. Mistakes are best clarified with transparency. She walked out feeling sick. Rebecca found her in the stairwell, staring at the wall as though it were about to deliver a revelation. You're pale, Rebecca said. Someone's tampering with my work, Valerie whispered. Emails, logs, invoices, things I never touched. Rebecca's expression hardened. Show me. They sat on a bench in the lower lobby. Valerie showed her screenshots. Timestamps. Email headers. The audit trail. Rebecca's jaw tightened. This isn't normal. Someone had to root through your ID manually. Why? I haven't done anything to anyone. Rebecca hesitated, then said, You impressed, Maximus. That alone puts you on a few radars. Valerie swallowed. Do you think Leo? Rebecca didn't let her finish. I think Leo has been here a long time. And long-timers don't like disruptions. That night, Valerie barely slept. She replayed the timeline over and over until dawn. She checked old emails. She made lists. She circled anomalies. She texted herself reminders. Everything felt like trying to hold water in shaking hands. By morning, she had nothing but dread. The memo arrived at 8:11 a.m. to Board Leadership. CC, HAR, Operations. Subject, Investigation Inquiry Employee Activity. Hamilton, Valerie. Her breath hitched. She clicked it open. Board members. We have identified discrepancies related to project files tied to Miss Hamilton's ID. These include unauthorized financial revisions, altered vendor communications, and late-night logs inconsistent with standard protocol. Further review recommended. Her badge beeped strangely when she tried to access the event server. Denied. She was locked out. A few managers looked at her with badly concealed pity. Others watched with something worse, the eager gleam of people waiting for someone else to fall. In the corridor near the elevators, Leo murmured to a board member, someone older, someone influential, someone who nodded slowly as Leo spoke. Leo caught Valerie's eye for a fraction of a second. He smiled. Not wide, not cruel, just satisfied. A chill ran through her. Something terrible was being built around her, brick by invisible brick. At 10:47 a.m., her phone buzzed with a notification. From Executive Board. Subject. Urgent boardroom review. Attendance. Required. Her pulse dropped. Required. Boardroom. Urgent. Those words only ever meant one thing. She steadied herself against the wall, the phone trembling in her hand. Her mind raced. What if they believe the logs? What if Maximus thinks I lied? What if this is the end before I even started? She felt the weight of Matteo's dinosaur drawings in her purse. She felt Skylar's tiny hand in hers from the morning they met. She felt everything she fought for teetering on the edge of something sharp. A soft ping signaled another email. Please arrive within the next 10 minutes. Valerie closed her eyes and exhaled shakily. What's about to come next? She whispered to herself. Could destroy everything. She straightened her blazer, lifted her chin, and headed toward the boardroom. One step, then another, toward judgment, toward betrayal, toward the truth, whatever it would cost. If this twist made your stomach drop, comment your reaction and share this story. Truth matters, and Valerie will need all the support she can get. The next chapter? It's the confrontation that will change everything. Valerie stood outside the tall, frosted glass doors of the executive boardroom, her palms damp, her breath shallow. The faint buzz of the overhead light sounding like static in her skull. Her name badge hung around her neck like a piece of metal on trial. This was supposed to be a day of reassurance, a continuation of her hard-earned success. Instead, she felt as if she were about to walk into a courtroom where she was the prosecutor, the defendant, and the confused witness all at once. Here goes nothing, she whispered. The doors opened with a mechanical sigh. The boardroom was nothing like the warm, chaotic corridors she'd worked through the night before. It was sterile, cold, the kind of room where big decisions were made with calm voices and devastating consequences. 12 leather chairs lined a long obsidian table that reflected the overhead lights like a dark lake. At the far end sat the board members, men and women whose faces carried the weight of empires. Their expressions were unreadable. Preston sat stiffly near the corner, hands folded too tightly. Rebecca stood behind him, her jaw tense. And Leo Baker. Leo was seated confidently at the table, his suit crisp, his tablet glowing with prepared notes. He looked up when Valerie entered, offering a polite, almost sympathetic smile. It made her stomach twist. Miss Hamilton, the chairman said, gesturing to the empty seat in the middle of the table. Please sit. She lowered herself into the chair, back straight, heart pounding so loudly she was sure the room could hear it. The air felt electric, humming with anticipation, the quiet before a storm. Leo cleared his throat theatrically, lifting his tablet like an attorney preparing to present an airtight case. As operations director, he began. It's my duty to ensure this hotel's integrity remains intact, and unfortunately... He paused for effect, eyes flickering to Valerie. There are several concerns about Miss Hamilton's activities during and after last night's event. Valerie's pulse spiked. Leo tapped the screen. The main display lit up, projecting a series of timestamps and emails. First, he said, system logs show unauthorized invoice changes processed under Miss Hamilton's ID between 12:58 a.m. and 1:06 a.m. A board member leaned forward. At 1 a.m, Leo nodded sorrowfully. Yes. That isn't possible, Valerie said, voice trembling. I wasn't working then. I wasn't even awake, Leo continued as if she hadn't spoken. Second, multiple vendors received revised confirmations from Miss Hamilton's email. He clicked again. Here are the messages. Emails appeared time-stamped, addressed with her name, containing instructions she had never written. Her throat dried. And third, he swiped to a folder labeled Confidential Discrepancies. We found an altered document packet, one that resembles internal financial reporting attached to an outgoing message directed to an unauthorized external contact. A wave of murmurs swept through the table. Preston shifted uncomfortably. Rebecca's eyes widened in horror. The chairman raised a hand. Is this suggesting espionage, Mr. Baker? Leo didn't answer immediately. He let the implication linger like poison. Then, I'm not saying Miss Hamilton intended harm. He glanced toward her with crafted pity. But the pattern suggests negligence at best, and intentional leaks at worst. The words hit like physical blows. I didn't do any of that, Valerie whispered, voice cracking with humiliation. I've worked here for 2 days. Why would I sabotage anything? Why would I even know how to? Leo folded his hands. With respect, Miss Hamilton, the logs are tied directly to your credentials. Her vision blurred. I'm telling you they're not mine. Someone used my ID. Miss Hamilton, the chairman interrupted gently. You'll have a chance to respond. But first, we must review the evidence. Valerie felt heat rise behind her eyes, shame, anger, helplessness. She forced herself not to break. Not here, not in front of them. The board members whispered among themselves, leaning close, exchanging looks. Unauthorized access, large discrepancies, financial risk, potential liability. Every word felt like a knife twisting deeper. The gray-haired chairman finally looked at Valerie. Miss Hamilton, do you have any explanation for these inconsistencies? She opened her mouth and nothing came out, not because she didn't have one, but because her explanation sounded ridiculous even to her own ears. Someone is framing me. A senior manager with system access secretly altered timestamps. I don't know why. I just know I didn't do it. She swallowed hard. I didn't make those changes, she said softly. I don't know who did, but it wasn't me. A younger board member leaned toward Leo. Mr. Baker, you're confident in this data. Leo nodded solemnly. Absolutely. I vetted it myself. Her stomach twisted. They believed him. They didn't even know her. She was a stranger who'd slipped into their world for one shining moment, and now that same world was shredding her to pieces. She felt herself drowning in humiliation. That's when the door opened, and Maximus Klein walked in. The room froze. Maximus strode to his seat at the head of the table, the late morning sunlight catching the sharp lines of his suit. His expression was unreadably calm, the kind of calm that precedes an earthquake. Apologies for the delay, he said. Traffic. Every board member straightened. Even Leo subtly adjusted his posture, pretending confidence he no longer felt. Maximus sat, folded his hands, and looked directly at Valerie. Let's review, he said. Leo perked up. Of course, Mr. Klein. As I was explaining, Miss Hamilton has made several unauthorized— Show me. His voice was soft, controlled, dangerous. Leo clicked through the slides again, explaining timestamps, emails, and modifications. Valerie braced herself. Maximus didn't blink. When Leo finished, silence filled the room. Then Maximus leaned back, eyes still on the screen. I expected better forgery. Leo stiffened. The board blinked in confusion. Maximus continued, voice smooth as glass. The invoice logs you're referencing? I kept the original drafts from the event. He lifted a black folder. One Valerie recognized. I keep copies of major event files as CEO. Standard procedure. Leo's face paled. Maximus opened the folder. This, he said, tapping the paper, is the original approved invoice. Note the timestamp 8:14 p.m. Miss Hamilton's signature here. These are her real submissions. He looked up. Now, compare those to the altered logs on your screen. The differences were glaring. The digital signatures didn't match the physical ink lines on Valerie's form. The timestamps conflicted with security badge logs. The revised vendor instructions contained phrasing Valerie would never use. She wasn't even in the building at 1 a.m. Maximus added. Security footage confirms she left at 11:52 p.m. Valerie's breath caught. Rebecca's eyes filled with relief. The board members shifted uncomfortably. Leo tried to recover. Perhaps. Someone forwarded the approvals to her. Maximus cut him off with the iciness of a man who rarely raised his voice because he didn't need to. The audit trail on your own device tells another story. Leo's mouth fell open. Maximus tapped a final document on the screen, a system log he had clearly pulled himself. Every altered entry, Maximus said, originated from a terminal in operations. He paused. Your office terminal, Mr. Baker. A collective gasp swept the board. Leo's lips trembled. There must be an explanation. There is. Maximus's eyes hardened. You falsified logs. You altered documents. You framed a new hire to protect your own position. Leo's hands shook visibly. Valerie watched, stunned, as his confidence crumbled into dust. The chairman stood. This is grounds for immediate suspension pending investigation. Leo rose suddenly, voice cracking. She was replacing me, don't you see? He was grooming her, giving her opportunities no one else got. Enough, Maximus said sharply. Leo's face broke into a twisted mixture of regret and bitterness. 2 security officers stepped into the room. Leo looked at Valerie one last time, an expression she couldn't decipher. Hatred? Envy? Recognition? He was let out. Silence fell in the wake of his footsteps. The board took only moments to finalize the vote. Leo, suspended. His access, revoked. Investigation, in full force. Valerie, cleared. Both Rebecca and Preston exhaled audible relief. Preston looked like he might cry from embarrassment. Rebecca placed a warm hand on Valerie's back. The chairman turned to her. Miss Hamilton, we apologize for the distress. You are not under review. You have been exonerated. Valerie swallowed, trying not to shake. Maximus looked at her quietly, not with pity, but with something heavier, something protective. I'm truly sorry, he said. His voice low enough for only her to hear. You should never have been dragged into this. I'll make sure nothing like this touches you again. The warmth of those words nearly undid her. When the board dismissed the meeting, the room emptied slowly, leaving her and Maximus standing near the dark glass table. She hugged the coordination folder to her chest, the same folder that almost became her downfall. Her hands trembled. Her composure cracked. Maximus stepped closer, not invading her space, but near enough that she felt the quiet solidity of him. You fought hard last night, he said softly. But today, you fought blind, and you still stood your ground. She blinked back unexpected tears. I thought it was over for me. It isn't, he said gently. Not even close. He hesitated, a rare vulnerability flickering in his expression. Valerie, he said. Will you consider staying? Not just for the job, but for more than that. Her breath caught. He wasn't just offering protection. He wasn't just offering employment. He was offering something far more dangerous, far more tender, far more real. What's about to come next? He murmured. Doesn't have to be something you face alone. She looked at his outstretched hand. Then she placed her trembling fingers into his. If you love a justice moment, hit like and tell me your rating out of 10 inches the comments. What happens next? 2 families collide with a world that's watching. And everything changes again. The week after the boardroom showdown felt like stepping out of a violent storm and finding yourself in quiet sunlight, not fully trusting it. Not fully relaxing, but letting warmth touch you anyway. Valerie walked through those days as if her bones were still vibrating with adrenaline. Yet gradually, small pieces of normalcy fell back into place. The first morning after she was officially cleared, Valerie woke up in her small apartment to sunlight spilling across Mateo's dinosaur bedsheets. For the first time in months, her chest felt lighter, not fixed, not perfect, but less suffocating. Her bank account, which had hovered dangerously close to panic territory, now showed her first provisional paycheck. Rent was paid early. The fridge was stocked with real groceries, not just leftovers and hope. There were apples, cereal, even a carton of orange juice that hadn't been on sale. When she set breakfast in front of Mateo, he stared at it like she'd presented him with a royal feast. Mommy, he whispered dramatically, you bought name-brand waffles. She laughed, a surprised, unguarded laugh she hadn't heard from herself in a while. Don't get used to it, buddy. It's a temporary delusion. Mateo took a giant bite. I love delusions. As she packed his school bag a little heavier with new crayons she'd finally been able to buy, she caught her reflection in the window. She looked tired, yes, but there was something softer around her eyes. The aftermath of fear, the first breath of stability. It was Maximus's idea. He called early Saturday with a tone that tried to sound casual but didn't quite manage it. Skylar hasn't stopped talking about Mateo, he said. She said he's the only person who understands dinosaurs have feelings. I don't know what that means, but apparently it's a high compliment. Valerie smiled. It is, actually. Then, he continued, I wondered if you 2 might join us at the city zoo this afternoon. The zoo? Her heart fluttered. Low pressure, fresh air, normal. He added gently. Normal. She hadn't tasted that in a very long time. When they arrived, Skylar ran to Mateo, immediately clutching a plush unicorn under her arm. Mateo, look. Her name is Galaxy Sparkles. What kind of dinosaur is she? He asked. examining the unicorn seriously. She's not a dinosaur, Skylar giggled. Mateo frowned. But she could be. With wings, and just like that, they were off, two small bodies sprinting toward the reptile house, leaving a trail of laughter behind them. Valerie watched them go, the ache in her chest equal parts joy and disbelief. Maximus stood beside her, hands in his pockets, tie loosened from weekend ease. The image of power softened by fatherhood. "You okay?" he asked. "Still adjusting," she admitted. They walked through the zoo together. It wasn't a date, not exactly, but it floated somewhere close to one. When he paid for lemonade and handed her one without asking what she wanted, it struck her. He noticed things. He remembered things. They passed through the aviary, the big cat exhibit, the little train that circled the park. At one point, Mateo tugged Maximus's hand to show him a T-Rex statue. "Look," Mateo said. "This is the one that ate the other one." Maximus crouched beside him. Scientific accuracy aside, that's impressive. Valerie watched the exchange with a lump in her throat. A billionaire CEO crouching to admire imaginary dinosaur battles. Skylar slipped her hand into Valerie's. "Miss Valerie," she said seriously, "you should tell Daddy to buy us all ice cream." Valerie blinked. "Me? You're the boss," Skylar whispered. She tried not to laugh. "I think your dad might disagree." But when Skylar tugged her toward the ice cream stand, Maximus followed without question. For the first time, it felt like a small family orbit. Accidental. Gentle. Real. They didn't notice the camera flashes until they were leaving the zoo. Two women near the exit paused mid-conversation, eyes widening as they saw Maximus holding Mateo's discarded dinosaur tail backpack in one hand and Skylar perched on his hip. That's the CEO. And who's the woman? His employee? Are they? By the next morning, 3 gossip blogs had posted blurry photos. Billionaire Maximus Klein seen spending the day at the zoo with new employee and 2 children. Co-workers or something more? Klein family outing? Speculation rises. Valerie nearly dropped her phone. Her heart hammered. The comments were worse strangers dissecting her outfit, her hair, her son, her presumed intentions. She felt suddenly naked, exposed to a world she'd never agreed to belong to. When she arrived at the hotel on Monday, whispers chased her through the lobby. "That's her. The zoo woman. I heard he invited her." "No, she invited him." "She's smart, he's rich, it makes sense." Her cheeks burned. Maximus noticed instantly. When he passed her in the hallway, he paused just long enough to say quietly, "I'm handling it," but that didn't stop the knot in her stomach. Being seen was not the same as being known, and being misinterpreted was the price of proximity to a powerful man. On Tuesday morning, the building buzzed with tension as 2 security officers escorted Leo Baker out of the executive wing. He wasn't fighting, not physically, but the fury on his face was unmistakable. "Unbelievable," he muttered loudly enough for half the floor to hear. "Years of loyalty replaced by a woman who's been here 5 minutes. Valerie froze where she stood. Leo's eyes locked onto hers as he passed. "This company," he hissed, "is going to regret protecting you." A chill raced down her spine. The elevator doors closed on his expression, a mixture of bitterness, humiliation, and something darker. Rebecca approached quietly. "You okay?" Valerie nodded. "I think so." But inside, her nerves were tangled. Even with justice served, trauma left a residue. The hotel seemed to exhale collectively once Leo was gone. Things steadied. Processes clarified. Preston apologized formally. People began treating Valerie with something closer to respect, but exhaustion clung to her muscles like a second skin. Survival came at a cost. That Friday evening, Maximus asked if he could drop by after work. "Just to talk," he said. Nothing formal. She suspected otherwise. He arrived at her apartment just after sunset with a small paper bag containing her favorite pastries from the cafe downstairs, something she'd mentioned once. Without thinking, they sat on her porch. Mateo and Skylar played inside, laughing over a Lego dinosaur fairy world they'd constructed together. For a while, Maximus didn't speak. He watched the sky shift from gold to lavender. Then, "Valerie," he said, "I know the last few weeks have been intense." "That's one word for it," she said softly. He smiled faintly. I keep thinking about what I want for my daughter, what I want for myself. And the truth is, I want something normal. She turned to him. Normal? He nodded. Something unpolished. Something steady. Something human. A breath. Something I think I've been missing for a long time. Her chest tightened. He looked suddenly vulnerable, a stark contrast to the controlled CEO the world saw. And you? He continued. You bring that into a room. You bring warmth, honesty. You bring light to Skylar's life. And to mine. Valerie looked down at her hands. I'm scared, she admitted. Your world moves fast. It watches everything. It judges everything. He nodded. I know. And I won't pretend it's easy. But I want to build something that isn't about headlines or hierarchy. Just two parents who care. Two people who care. Silence held the porch gently. I like you, he said simply. Probably more than I should. Her heart stumbled. I like you too, she whispered. Probably more than I should. For a moment, neither moved. Then a thud inside the apartment broke the spell, followed by Skylar yelling, Mateo! You broke Galaxy Sparkle's castle. I'm telling Miss Valerie you did it. Maximus exhaled a laugh. Back to reality, he murmured. Back to normal, she corrected. When they stepped inside, they found Skylar and Mateo sitting cross-legged on the floor, both holding a stuffed unicorn like it was a sacred artifact. Skylar stood up, hands on her hips. We were talking, she declared. Mateo nodded solemnly. Important talking. Oh, Maximus said, amused. About what? Skylar pointed at Valerie and Maximus. You two should live together. Valerie choked on air. What? Or get a dog, Mateo added. Dogs help people be a family. Skylar nodded decisively. Yes. Get a dog and then live together. We'll be a team. And I'll be the boss. Maximus covered his mouth with his hand to hide a smile. Valerie stared between the children, stunned, heart pounding with a mixture of panic, affection, and something dangerously close to hope. Skylar clapped her hands. It's decided. We're going to be a family. Two. Valerie's breath caught. Maximus's eyes flicked to hers, questioning, hopeful, terrified, all at once. And she knew. What's about to come next would test everything. Their hearts, their families, and a world ready to scrutinize their every move. If this made you smile, share this with a friend and comment what you'd rate this love moment from 1 to 10. The next part? The beginning of a fragile new family, and the storm that tries to break it. The morning after, the children declared that everyone should live together and get a dog immediately. Valerie woke up with her heart doing strange, contradictory things, half fluttering with anxiety, half settling into a soft, quiet peace she hadn't felt in years. Sunlight peeked through her curtains. Mateo's soft snores drifted from his room, and for the first time in a long time, the air did not feel heavy. She padded into the kitchen, started the coffee maker, and leaned against the counter. Her thoughts wandered to the porch, to Maximus's gentle confession, to the way he had looked at her like she wasn't just a complicated woman with too much on her plate, but someone he wanted in his life. The warmth of the memory lingered. A moment later, Mateo burst out of his room, hair sticking up in all directions, his pajamas on backwards. Mom, he said breathlessly. You won't believe what Galaxy Sparkles did last night. What? She asked, smiling. She made me dream we had a new dog named... He scrunched his face. Thunderbolt Pancake. She laughed. That's a very powerful name. He nodded seriously. He can bark the alphabet. She ruffled his hair. Of course he can. Then Mateo spotted something on the kitchen table and gasped. The new backpack, the one she'd bought yesterday after her shift. The one with glow-in-the-dark dinosaur prints. His eyes lit up. For me? Yes, baby. He hugged the backpack so hard she worried he'd choke it. This is the best morning ever. And for a brief second, she believed him. At the Street Augustine that afternoon, Valerie walked into the staff lounge and froze. Everyone stood. Then they clapped. The sound echoed around the space, bright and warm. Rebecca beamed at her. Officially official. Come get your badge. Preston stepped forward, looking humbled and deeply apologetic, and handed her a new ID card. Valerie Hamilton. Events. Assistant manager. Provisional to permanent review. Her throat tightened. Chef Monroe passed behind her, muttering in his gravelly voice. Don't let it get to your head. You still owe me a properly aligned plating diagram. Valerie laughed. Thank you, Chef. He paused. You earned this, he said quietly, before shuffling away. A few other staff members approached with congratulations, not the stiff, suspicious glances from before, but real approval, real acceptance. For the first time, she felt like she belonged here. Like she wasn't just a lucky survivor of a chaotic week, but someone who'd carved her place with effort, kindness, and grit. Rebecca leaned close. You're doing great, Val. And not just at work. Valerie blushed. Rebecca. Oh, please. Rebecca grinned. Everyone saw the zoo photos. You two were glowing. Valerie groaned softly. I'm never going to escape that, am I? Nope, Rebecca said cheerfully. Not when it's that cute. That Saturday, Maximus invited them to a park outside the city, the kind with a quiet lake, tall trees and picnic tables that weren't full of strangers crowding each other. He arrived early with Skylar, who was wearing a sparkly tutu and carrying a clipboard. For the agenda, she explained. We're having a family meeting. Maximus rubbed his forehead. I didn't approve an agenda. Skylar ignored him completely. Valerie and Mateo showed up with sandwiches, fruit cups, and enough snacks to feed every squirrel in the park. They settled under a large tree, the late afternoon light filtering through the branches like gold dust. Skylar cleared her throat. Okay, meeting called, she announced, slamming her clipboard onto the table like a miniature CEO. Mateo raised his hand eagerly. I second. Valerie exchanged an amused glance with Maximus. Skylar spread out crayons and paper. We need to decide what our family will look like. Valerie blinked. Our family, Skylar nodded. Yes, because Daddy likes Miss Valerie, and I like Mateo, and Mateo likes me, and Miss Valerie likes Daddy. Maximus coughed loudly. Valerie nearly choked on her lemonade. Skylar continued, determined. So we're making a plan. She slid a sheet of paper toward Mateo. First we draw the family. Mateo drew himself, Skylar, Valerie, and Maximus with hair that looked suspiciously like fire. It's power hair, Mateo explained. Because he's the boss, Skylar approved. Good. Now the dog. What dog? Maximus asked. Our dog, Skylar said. The one we're definitely getting. Mateo leaned close and whispered. His name is Thunderbolt Pancake. Skylar gasped. That is perfect. They drew the dog 5 legs, wings, and a tail shaped like a lightning bolt. Valerie rested her chin on her hand, breath warm with laughter she didn't want to suppress. Maximus leaned close. I haven't had a family meeting in years, he murmured. I forgot how chaotic they could be. She looked at him, really looked. The man who ran hotels with precision. The man who once felt too guarded for softness. The man who now sat cross-legged in the grass, letting children design a mythical dog he would probably end up adopting. Chaos suits you, she whispered. He met her eyes, a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. As the sun dipped lower, the kids ran off to chase bubbles near the lake. Their laughter drifted back like tiny bells. Maximus shifted closer, not imposing, not demanding, just closer. Valerie, he said, voice quiet. I've been thinking. That sounds dangerous, she teased. He smiled. Then he turned slightly, enough to face her fully. I want us to try, he said. Not a rushed thing, not a secret thing, just us. Publicly. Carefully. Honestly. Her breath hitched. This isn't a fairy tale, he continued. I travel. I make difficult decisions. My life is loud. And yours is grounded. Real. Which is why it works for me, he exhaled slowly. I want to build something sustainable. Something the kids can trust. Something we can trust. She swallowed hard. I'm scared, she confessed. People are watching. He nodded. They'll talk anyway. Let them. All I'm asking is we try with dinners, school drop-offs, and the occasional emergency meeting about fictional dog names. Her laughter shook slightly. Okay, she whispered. We can try. He reached for her hand and she let him take it. Not a grand kiss, not a dramatic moment. Something quieter, something truer, a choice. Later that evening, the four of them sat on a park bench overlooking the lake. Skylar was asleep on Valerie's lap, a half-finished drawing still clutched in her hand. Mateo leaned against Maximus, snoring softly. The last of the sunlight glowed around them. A gentle breeze rustled the trees. Somewhere behind them, a jogger paused, recognizing Maximus, a fleeting spark of curiosity crossing her face, but she kept running. Across the street, in a small newspaper stand window, a headline caught Valerie's eye. CEO defends employee after fraud accusation, insiders praise fairness. The article photo, Maximus walking out of the boardroom, was stern but resolute. Valerie looked down at the two sleeping children, then at Maximus's hand still wrapped around hers. Public perception was changing, but what mattered was here. On this bench, with these people, night settled around them like a soft blanket. City lights flickered on in the distance, glowing in the water's reflection. Fireflies blinked in the grass. Skylar murmured something about Thunderbolt Pancake needing a bedtime story. And Mateo mumbled agreement. Valerie leaned her head gently against Maximus's shoulder. For the first time in years, she felt her future stretching out not as a cliff, but as a path, uncertain, imperfect, but full of hope. Two kids dreaming, two adults holding on, a universe shifting quietly into alignment, and above them, the stars blinked softly as if giving their blessing. If this story warmed your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and comment the city you're watching from, plus your rating from 0 to 10. Stay tuned, what's about to come next may change everything again.